currently studying about, during the section where we talk about Abraham and his family. If I get to where I think I'm going to get this morning, we'll kind of finish the series, if you will, talking about Abraham's family. We're going to see a closing of a patriarchal era as our focus will shift. And I realized too that the other day that Genesis has, about 50 chapters in it, I think. So if you were hoping to get to chapter 50 in this class this semester, well, we're not. So I retitled this particular section as Epic of God Part 1. All right, Part 2 will be offered at a later date. And I'm not sure when that later date is, but I'll get with my education committee and we'll offer Part 2 later. That way we can at least take it all the way through chapter 50 and at least know what the scriptures say. I've tried to avoid a lot of speculation. I've given some opinions on certain things, but I've tried to avoid getting into what some people like to describe, getting into the weeds, if you will. I just want us to know the story. That when we read through it, we realize, and you've realized too that, oh, I didn't know that was in there after you've read it again, after you've looked at it again. And that's the wonderful thing about the scriptures is that you can read it today and then read it again a year later and you'll go, oh, why didn't I see that a year ago? Because there's some interesting stuff that pops out at us. And so it's continually a book that we can continue to read and study and glean wonderful things from it as far as what God is looking to share with us. Today we're going to start in chapter 22. We kind of started 22 last week. And you may recall that we were looking at Abraham was told to go, was tested. And so we're going to start this again. This is a significant moment in Abraham's life, as you well know. It would be a significant moment in anybody's life if you were presented with this kind of test. And given the opportunity to do this, what would you do? Would be the question that should come to mind. So before we get started, let's begin with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're indeed thankful that we have this day, this first day of the week, to come and gather together as saints, to be here to study this word, to study the words that you've given us in this particular Abraham's family and the things that he was presented, the challenges he had to overcome, and the life that he lived. The promise that came through him, and how even today we can see that promise. We're grateful for your blessings. We're grateful for the wonderful things that come our way from you. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Chapter 22. God tests Abraham. Now, most of us are used to tests. In other words, I've got a final tomorrow at school. Anybody ever had that? Anybody ever really just concerned about finals to where you stayed up all night studying for that last moment when your brain can just pack a little more in there and wishing you had another month to study? I've been there, done that. I've tried to stay awake all night. Coffee doesn't work. I guess that's why I like coffee. Coffee doesn't work. It doesn't keep me awake. I can drink coffee and go to sleep. It doesn't work when you're studying, tell you. But we're used to that kind of test. In chapter 22 and verse 1, after these things, God tested Abraham's faith. God's tested Abraham's faith. God said to Abraham, he says, Abraham. And he answered, here am I. Then God said, take your only son, Isaac, the son you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Kill him there and offer him as a whole burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. All right, let's just stop for a moment. How many of you here go, certainly, be glad to do that, God? Or how many of you go, wait a minute, can you repeat that? I mean, this is a moment that's very critical, or very Could refer to it as a watershed moment. This is something that's, what? Put before us. Well, what does Abraham do? And we've seen this throughout his life. Abraham got up early in the morning and saddled his donkey. He took Isaac and 2 servants with him. After he cut the wood for the sacrifice, they went to the place God had told them to go. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey. My son and I will go over there and worship, and then we will come back to you." Now, I don't know if in that conversation Abraham said to them, "And we will come back to you," but I did in this conversation, because that portends something's going to happen that is different than what it seems should have happened. He said, "We will come back to you." Now, I don't know what that meant in his faith, but we're going to see what happened. Abraham took the wood for the sacrifice and gave it to his son to carry, but he himself took the knife and the fire. So he and his son went on together. Isaac said to his father, "Father?" Abraham answered, "Yes, my son." Isaac said, "We have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb we will burn as a sacrifice?" Now, the kid's, he's on the ball here. He can put 2 to 2 together. He knows what's happening. He knows something is different. And so Abraham says, "God will give us the lamb for the sacrifice, my son." So Abraham and his son went on together and came to the place God had told him about. Abraham built an altar there, laid the wood on it, and then tied up his son Isaac and laid him on the wood on the altar. Then Abraham took his knife and was about to kill his son. What do you think Isaac was thinking? Yeah, what was Isaac thinking? How old was he? How old do you think he was? Old enough to carry wood. Was that about, I don't know, how old are you when you carry wood? He's a teenager, or at least an older child. What was he thinking? "Sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to put a dent in the car." I mean, this is significant. This is not like you're getting punished and sent to your room. This is significant. He's tied up, he's laying on the wood, and Abraham took his knife. This is a very significant moment for Abraham. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." Abraham answered, "Yes." The angel said, "Don't kill your son or hurt him in any way. Now I can see that you trust God and that you have not kept your son, your only son, from me." Now, when I was growing up, I colored these pictures, as a kid in the classes. Everybody's colored some pictures at times. I remember coloring one where somebody reached out of heaven and actually grabbed Abraham's hand and held it and stopped him from doing it. I don't know, that stuck with me. There's a lot of things stick with you as a kid, and so that's the vision I see. But here it says that the angel spoke to him and said, "Stop," and he stopped. Abraham looked up and saw a male sheep caught in the bush by its horns. So Abraham went and took the sheep and killed it. He offered it as a whole burnt offering to God, and his son was saved. So Abraham named the place, "The Lord provides." Even today, people say, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." God is tested, and the Lord provides. One of the most difficult things for me, at least, is to realize that the Lord does provide. I guess I'm just impatient, but I thought, well, I made a decision, something that should have been good. The angel of the Lord, in verse 15, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "The Lord says, because you did not keep back your son, your only son, from me, I make you this promise by my own name. I will surely bless you, and give you many descendants. They will be as many as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, and they will capture the cities of their enemies. Through your descendants, all the nations on the earth will be blessed because you obeyed me. This is a defining moment for Abraham. It's also a wonderful moment for us today because of Abraham's obedience. His descendants, and all the nations on the earth have been blessed because Abraham obeyed God. Verse 19, then Abraham returned to his servants. They all traveled back to Beersheba, and Abraham stayed there. After these things happened, someone told Abraham, whoop, we got a telegram. You know how every year you get a Christmas letter? Well, it wasn't every year you got a Christmas letter. He finally got his Christmas letter for the last decade or so. Brought him up to speed. So Beersheba, just to give you a kind of a feeling for where he's at, he's down in this area. I think the next one, yep, okay. And so the next one, in verse 20, so after these things that we just talked about, a very defining moment in Abraham's life and something very beneficial for us today even, he gets this letter. It says, hey, and after these things, someone told Abraham, your brother Nahor and his wife Milcah have children now. The first son is Uz, and the second son is Buz. I love that name. The third son is Kemuel, the father of Aram. Then there are Kesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlap, and Bethuel. I just wish I could pronounce them way better, but I'm just slaughtering it probably. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. Milcah was the mother of these 8 sons, and Nahor. Abraham's brother was the father. Also Nahor had 4 other sons by his slave woman, Ramah. Their names were, and you can read those down there if you'd like. If you look up this family tree, this is pretty cool. Obviously, we don't have them all, but we got Terah, we got Abraham, Nahor, Milcah, Bethuel, Laban, then we got Leah and Rachel. Kind of see how all that works? It gives us a preview of what's coming next, what's coming down the pike. So it's, even though it's kind of hard to read these names, it's important that we understand when these names come about and where they fit into the story, at least, because we're going to see some of these names later on, and it's helpful to know how this all works to is connected. And so when you review this family tree, it's kind of like, oh, okay, while they may have left out a few names, they only put the critical ones up there, or the important ones for the story up there, and so the rest are populating the land, if you will, and living their lives in relationship to what's going on around them. Any comments on that chapter? Yes? Right. He was 100 years old when that son was born. The comment is about, do we have limits on our faith? Abraham was 100 years old when that son was born, that promised son. Remember back in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, when that promise was made? And then God said, I sacrifice your only son that I promised I'd give you 100, and you got it at 100 years. He was born at 100 years old. But Abraham did say God will provide to Isaac, and so his faith was, I believe, at that time, limitless. He was willing to give his only son when asked. What a challenge, huh? What an example for us today. Any other comments? Chapter 23. Chapter 23 is a moment in Abraham's life and Sarah's life that is quite tender and quite, you could say sad, but it's also a moment that comes to us all at different times, different stages, different opportunities. Chapter 23, verse 1, Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She died in Kirith Arab, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham was very sad and cried because of her. After a while, he got up from the side of his wife's body and went to talk to the Hittites. He said, I am only a stranger and a foreigner here. Sell me some of your land so that I can bury my dead wife. Even though there's not too many lines here, too much said, you can feel the sadness that Abraham has on the passing of his wife. He's known her since pretty much she was a child. He was a child. They've been through a lot. They've shared a lot. They've probably had a few arguments where he slept outside for a while. You know, it's just, you can see so much love in his heart and sadness at this moment that after a while, it says, he got up from the side of his wife's body. He was there for a while, crying and grieving over the loss of her. He was very sad. And so he went and talked to the Hittites. The Hittites answered Abraham, Sir, you are a great leader among us. You may have the best place we have to bury your dead. You may have any of our burying places that you want. None of us will stop you from burying your dead wife. You can see here how well respected Abraham was in that land. He was a great leader among them. Now, Abraham was a very powerful man. He had a lot of resources at his command. Abraham rose and bowed to the people of the land the Hittites. He said to them, if you truly want to help me bury my dead wife here, speak to Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me. Ask him to sell me the cave of Machpelah in the edge of his field. I will pay him the full price. You can be the witnesses that I am buying it as a burial place. Ephron was sitting among the Hittites at the city gate. He answered Abram, no, sir, I will give you the land and the cave that is in it with these people as witness. Bury your dead wife. You can see the respect these people have for Abraham, the way they honor him. Now, it could be he's just a powerful man. They want to honor a powerful man. But there's, that's speculation. I don't know. But he is honored, and they're willing to do this. Then Abraham bowed before the Hittites. He said to Ephron before all the people, please let me pay you the full price for the field, accept my money, and I will bury my dead there. Ephraim answered Abraham, Sir, the land is worth 10 pounds of silver, but I won't argue with you over the price. Take the land and bury your dead wife. Negotiation going on in front of all these people at the gate here. These men of the gate. My wife has and I have a little joke between us. I say, listen, I'm going to go sit at the gate for a while. And she's cooking in the kitchen and says, okay. Just a joke between us. But the point is, this is where the men were. They were at the gate. This was the culture time, the culture of the day. Those that would come to the gate would make decisions about what was going on in the area. So this decision, this solemn decision, was being made and negotiated with Abraham. Abraham agreed and paid Ephraim in front of the Hittite witnesses. He weighed out the full price, 10 pounds of silver, and they counted the weight as traders normally did. In other words, they all agreed, we're using this scale from this company to determine how much is 10 pounds of silver. Verse 17. So Ephraim's field in Machpelah, east of Mamre, was sold. Abraham became the owner of the field, the cave in it, and all the trees that were in the field. The sale was made at the city gate with the Hittites as witnesses. After this, Abraham buried his wife, Sarah, in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre. Mamre was later called Hebron in the land of Canaan. So Abraham bought the field and the cave in it from the Hittites to use as a burying place. Very sad chapter for Abraham. But it shows the humanity that the people back in those days were just as human as you and I are, believe it or not. You know, the only difference is they didn't have cell phones. They had different ways of communicating. It was, you could say it was slower, but the passing of the spouse was very sad. Abraham wanted to honor her, wanted to bury her in a place that was, I don't know, the best, if you will, at that time. We're going to see this place as we go through the story here. So it's important to kind of put in our mind where this cave that is buried, where she was buried. It's going to come back in the story as we read through Genesis, where all the family of Abraham, go as their final resting place. And so this is how it came about. Let's see. So we're transitioning now from Abraham's family. We're seeing the end of years here. Abraham was in chapter 24. Any comments before we go on regarding Abraham and Sarah and the deal that Abraham made with the Hittites? Yeah, I wondered that too, but he also did that to some degree with those kings that he went and got when Lot was captured. They wanted to pay him stuff, and he just wanted to get Lot's own stuff back, and he refused any gifts at that time because he didn't want someone saying, well, I made you rich. Now, I don't know if this how this relates to here, but he didn't want somebody giving him the land. And he didn't want to be beholding to someone. And it's pure speculation on my part, but I can see him wanting very much to pay for the field. And it'd be a legal exchange that everyone witnessed, as opposed to a gift that was given. Dan? Sure. Yeah, and that's probably, works into the picture just from what we're looking at right now. There was just negotiation there at the city, and whether they were doing it out of honor or whether they were trying to ratchet up the price, get a fair price. Yes, we can speculate many ways, but I do think that Abraham didn't want to take it as a gift. He didn't want it as a gift. He didn't want it to be given to him, so he wanted to pay for it outright. And how that plays out, we'll see how that plays out, that's one place that his family can come back to. So some good stuff there. Any other comments? Verse 24, or chapter 24, sorry. Okay, we transition from the sad moment, if you will, in Abraham's life. We get into chapter 24. Abraham was now very old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. Abraham said to his oldest servant, who was in charge of everything he owned, put your hand under my leg. Make a promise to me before the Lord, the God of heaven and earth. Don't get a wife for my son from the Canaanite girls who live around here. Instead, go back to my country, to the land of my relatives, and get a wife for my son Isaac. How many parents here would love to be able to determine where their children get their spouses? All right? You know, that was the time. And of course, I always thought, put your hand under my leg. What is that? I can see signing a contract, shaking hands, crossing my fingers, if you will, cutting animals in half and walking in between them. But putting your hand under my leg, I don't get that one. Anybody got any comments on that? I think I know what it is, but anyway, anybody got any comments on that? Somebody studied that, I'm sure. Say it again. It's a very intimate, personal commitment. What little I've been able to read on this, it was just that, as Larry is pointing out, it was very intimate. It's very personal. And you notice he made it with somebody he trusted very dearly. He trusted this man with everything that he owned. And so when he made this intimate deal with him and certified it, if you will, with this particular way of doing it, the probability it was going to be carried out verbatim. That's the expectation of this. I don't know that we do anything like that today. Do we have anything like that we do today? Handshake, maybe. My handshake is my word, or my word is my word, hopefully. So it's just hard to compare to what we do today. This is something that was signed. Maybe you could say a covenant between a husband and wife, a marriage covenant. That's pretty intimate. The servant said to him in verse 5, "What if this woman does not want to return with me to this land? Then should I take your son with me back to your homeland?" I think that's a fair question. Hey, boss, you want me to go get your son a wife, but what if she doesn't want to come with me? How do I persuade her to come with me? I think that's a fair question and a fair concern. Abraham said to him, "No, don't take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, brought me from the home of my father and the land of my relatives, and he promised me I will give this land to your descendants. The Lord will send his angel before you to help you get a wife for my son." Wouldn't we all, as parents, love to have God helping us find a spouse for our children? Wouldn't that be great? "I will give this land," and the Lord said to his angel, let's see, "if the girl won't come back," verse 8, "with you, you will be free from this promise. But you must not take my son back there." Can't take him back. So the servant put his hand under his master's leg and made a promise to Abraham about this. So we've got a promise here. The servant took 10 of Abraham's camels and left, carrying with him many different kinds of beautiful gifts. He went to northwest Mesopotamia, to Nahor's city. In the evening, when the women came out to get water, he made the camels kneel down at the well outside the city. Notice the women went and got the water back in those days. Why didn't the men do that? Anyway, I diverge. The servant said, "Lord, God of my master Abraham, allow me to find a wife for his son today. Please show this kindness to my master Abraham. Here I am standing by the spring, and the girls from the city are coming out to get water. I will say to one of them, 'Please put your jar down so I can drink.' Then let her say, 'Drink. I will also give water to your camels. If that happens, I will know she is the right one for your servant Isaac, and that you have shown kindness to my master.'" This servant prays to God. Help me, Lord. How many of us pray before we engage in something? Here he was wanting to do his master a good job. Before the servant had finished praying, verse 15, Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, came out of the city. Bethuel was the son of Milcah and Nahor and Abraham's brother. Rebekah was carrying her water jar on her shoulder. She was very pretty, a virgin. She had never had sexual relations with a man. She went down to the spring and filled her jar, then came back up. The servant ran to her and said, "Please give me a little water from your jar." Rebekah said, "Drink, sir." She quickly lowered the jar from his shoulder and gave him a drink. After he finished drinking, Rebekah said, "I will also pour some water for your camels." So she quickly poured all the water from her jar into the drinking trough for the camels. Then she kept running to the well until she had given all the camels enough to drink. The servant sitting there going, thinking, "Yeah, ching, I found it. Found the girl." She delivers water to the camels. The servant quietly watched her. He wanted to be sure the Lord had made his trip successful. After the camels had finished drinking, he gave Rebekah a gold ring weighing 1/5 of an ounce and 2 gold arm bracelets weighing about 4 ounces each. He asked, "Who is your father? Is there a place in his house for me and my men to spend the night?" Rebekah answered, "My father is Bethuel, the son of Milcah, and Nahor." And she said, "And yes, we have straw for your camels and a place for you to spend the night." The servant bowed and worshipped the Lord and said, "Blessed is the Lord, the God of my master Abraham. The Lord has been kind and truthful to him and has led me to my master's relatives." You know, you just arrive there and there it is. It's like he didn't have to wait a week. He didn't have to go look them up in the phone book. He didn't have to do any kind of searching, asking. The Lord was with them. Then Rebekah ran and told her mother's family about all these things. She had a brother named Laban who ran out to Abraham's servant who was still at the spring. Laban had heard what she had said and had seen the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arm. So he ran out to the well, and there was a man standing by the camels at the spring. Laban said, "Sir, you are welcome to come in. You don't have to stand outside. I have prepared the house for you and also a place for your camels." What a journey he took there. So Abraham's servant went into the house after Laban unloaded the camels and gave them the straw and food. He gave water to Abraham's servant so he and the men with him could wash their feet. Then Laban gave the servants food, but the servant said, "I will not eat until I have told you why I came." So Laban said, "Tell us." He said, "I am Abraham's servant." And you can read the rest of this. It is a wonderful story as he relates to Laban, what was to happen. And in verse 45, he said, "Before I finished my silent prayer, Rebekah came." What a moment. And so he's relating this, and says, at verse 49, he says, "Now tell me, will you be kind and truthful to my master? And if not, tell me so. Then I will know what I should do." Laban and Bethuel answered, "This is clearly from the Lord. We cannot change what must happen. Rebekah is yours. Take her and go. Let her marry her master's son, your master's son, as the Lord has commanded." So they were impressed that this is from the Lord. They realized that. And so they were willing to obey, if you will, what was presented. In 52, when Abraham's servant heard these words, he bowed face down on the ground before the Lord. Then he gave Rebekah gold and silver, jewelry and clothes. He also gave expensive gifts to her brother and mother. The servant and the men with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, the servant said, "Now let me go back to my master." Rebekah's mother and her brother said, "Let Rebekah stay with us at least 10 days. After that she may go." But the servant said to them, "Do not make me wait, because the Lord has made my trip successful. Now let me go back to my master." Rebekah's brother and mother said, "We will call Rebekah and ask her what she wants to do." They called her and asked her, "Do you want to go with this man now?" And she said, "No, I'd like to wait 10 days. No, she said, "Yes, I do." She hasn't met the man. She's just been recipient of some rather nice things. She said, "Yes, I do." So they allowed Rebekah and her nurse to go with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said, "Our sister, may you be the mother of thousands of people, and may your descendants capture the cities of their enemies." Then Rebekah and her servant girls got on the camels and followed the servant and his men. So the servant took Rebekah and left. At this time, Isaac had left Beerlea Roi and was living in southern Canaan. He came out to think, he looked up and saw camels coming. Rebekah also looked and saw Isaac. Then she jumped down from the camel and asked the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant answered, "That is my master." So Rebekah covered her face with her veil. The servant told Isaac everything that had happened, and Isaac brought Rebekah into the tent of Sarah, his mother, and she became his wife. Isaac loved her very much, and so she was comforted after his mother's death. So he was comforted after his mother's death. What a beautiful picture, huh? Sight unseen. They meet each other. This is a depiction back in 1841. Not sure how accurate it is, but it kind of shows the coming together of two people that God brought together. I mean, you've seen all these movies where you have these two people running to each other in slow motion, very slow motion, and they get together, and it's a beautiful moment at the time. And here Isaac and Rebekah come together. What a beautiful story. Yeah, Nathan. How did she know he was a virgin? Well, it said so in that verse there we read. I didn't research that, but I'll be glad to look into it. I'm not certain, but it says she was, and I'll just have to take it for what it says. I'm sure her family would have known too, because they got a pretty good eye on her. They watched her pretty close. So I'm not sure. She wasn't wearing a ring. There you go. What a beautiful story, huh? How many would like to have that kind of relationship that God decides, hey, here's your spouse? Wonderful story. Where are we at here in time? Okay. Yes. Right. Yeah, many times spiritual never gets there. But yeah, you're right. Many times it's in our world today. We're attracted to what looks pleases our eyes, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with that in a true sense or in a godly sense. It's just that we generally think about God second time, or is after the fact. But we expect to be relationships are. Because we like the looks of each other, we're supposed to be a great relationship. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. And of course, there's others that say, well, there's relationships have been built on, I met my wife at church kind of thing. We went to camp every year as kids, and we saw each other, and we fell in love, and then finally got married, and we were married in the church. And then you've seen, unfortunately, people, even in the church, who have divorced and separated, and their relationship doesn't last. Alicia? Yeah, you got 5 minutes for a can of worms. Yeah, what was the ceremony, or made him his wife? And if you look at just the scriptures there, it seems to be the act of taking her into his mother's tent, and I'm going to assume they embraced each other as husband and wife, and consummated the marriage there. I don't see any kind of ceremony like we do. I don't see a band playing "Here Comes the Bride." There doesn't seem to be anything like that, and so I've heard others talk about what really made him his wife, and it's not clear there was anything else other than Abraham told his servant to go get a woman, and it happens to be Rebekah because of certain circumstances, and everybody agreed this is from God. It seemed that way. And then Isaac was quite happy. Correct. Yeah. What Alicia's talking about, it seems like in the world today, intimate relationships are not a commitment. They're just a thing that happens until you're no longer satisfied with the individual, and so there's no commitment. Dave? Well, he carried her over the threshold. Right. Now, we don't have the timeline. Right. That's correct. I always assumed there was a timeline because camels move at the speed of what? Camel speed. And so they had to take a while to get back to his brother's house and so forth. So there's a timeline there. Let's see. You, go ahead. Well, I don't know if it was being preserved for that occasion, but it definitely was being preserved. And I think, yes, and it was also something that Isaac found comforting to know that his mother's tent was there. Because well, yeah, but it was his mother's tent. And he spent a lot of time in that tent. And probably when he went in there were things in there that reminded him of when he was a toddler, when he was a kid, of his mother. So yeah, that tent was there for a while. And whether it was specifically for that occasion, I'm not sure the scriptures clearly say that, but he certainly used it for that. He took her into his mother's tent, and Rebekah became his wife. It's a beautiful story. There's a lot of questions off of one sentence. Anyone else? Yes. Right. Yeah, and that was later on, too, as far as that was established later on. Exactly how they knew it right then, all I can do is refer to the verse and where it says she was. But her family would have known, too, at that time. They would have kept a pretty good eye on her at that time. Anyone else? Well, we don't have time to really get into the next chapter. By all means, read ahead. Because we're going to end up here completing our discussion about Abraham's family. We're going to move into Isaac's family. We're going to see here in chapter 25 a little bit about Abraham, and then we'll transition to Isaac's family. Thank you for your attention this morning. Appreciate your comments.